work the mind in a way where you can see multiple truths, you can see multiple ideas, and you can see where the gap is in your own thinking, and maybe the gap is in your own perspective.
Welcome to The Shift, where we search for ways to do better by thinking better.
Whether you're going through a major life change, looking to deepen your understanding of yourself, or hoping to improve your relationships with others, The Shift is here for you.
We're your hosts, Isla and Yashar, an endlessly curious sister and brother team.
As certified brain-based executive coaches with backgrounds in medicine and management, we combine the neurosciences, performance psychology, strategic planning methodology, and mindfulness techniques to empower your transformation from the inside out.
Join us in conversation as we explore better ways to show up for ourselves and each other. Welcome back, friends. So today's topic that I'm bringing to the table is about the power and importance of nuance. I cannot even count at this point the number of conversations I've had over the last few months about this idea that both are true. This fixation on these binary terms of right and wrong and this and that and black and white only keep us stuck. And I come back to this over and over, probably in almost every conversation I have, that nuance is critical for us to not only optimize our thinking, but actually thrive in our lives if we're able to hold two seemingly opposing truths in tandem and know that one actually doesn't negate the other and both can be true in parallel, even though they might seem contradictory. Yashar, I know this is one of our favorite conversations. I know we agree on it, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
We do agree on it. We agree on it a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think an evolved mind is a mind that can hold two or more truths. And so with many things in life, is a Venn diagram to it all. Mm-hmm. And the meeting point of the Venn diagram, the middle point is, I think, where mostly the truth lies, not always at the edges, sometimes, but usually majority of the time it's in the middle. And to be able to look into the gray and to be able to look into these opposites and to find commonality, to find understanding, I think it's a skill set. And I think it's a skill set that many of us need to practice more often so that we are more in collaboration with one another and more capable of thinking more critically through challenging situations.
Yashar, can you give me an example of something in your life where you have had to hold two seemingly contradictory truths in tandem?
The one that I always go to is around emotions. Because the details of people's lives are individual and we might have similarities, but we also may not. But I've discovered through, again, this work over multiple decades that the emotionality around people's lives is much more of a common denominator in a meeting ground. And so what I mean by that is the both are true, yes, and. The powerful word of and by itself gives room for more than one thing to exist. And I think with emotions, this is really important. So for example, I get into an argument with my spouse, my son, a friend about something. I can feel my anger, my sadness, my frustration, my even disappointment. And I can communicate that I still love you. I still care about you. I'm still deeply committed to this process. I really want to learn more. And commitment, loving, connection, I'm here for this. And I'm angry right now, can live together. Meaning I can be feeling both of those things at the same time. And I think with my growth and maybe limited but growing maturity, I would say that emotions have been the place where the dualities personally have become really interesting, where I allow myself to feel opposing feelings, even at the same time.
So tell me why you use the word and instead of but.
But takes away what came before it. If I use my same examples, I love you, but I'm angry with you right now. Instead of I'm angry with you right now, and I love you a lot. And because I love you a lot, this is really hurting me. And I'm finding myself really activated by your behavior. And anyone who's a parent can understand this multiple times a day, maybe, is like, I really am angry with you right now. I'm really disappointed with the decision you made after we've spoken about X, Y, or Z 10 times. And I'm still here because I'm your father and I love you. And we're going to figure out a way through this together. And so, but would take away all of the above and unites it.
We were having a conversation with a client when we're doing some succession planning, and this came up, this both truths in tandem and conversation. And I think it helped him, hold space for all of his emotions and not have to kind of mask one for the other. And the example that came out was, his daughter taking over as CEO. It was that exact feeling of that I feel immense pride in watching my daughter grow and blossom and take over this role with integrity and talent. And I feel deep amounts of grief and uncertainty and mixed feelings on what that means for me after I've done this job, created this company from the ground up and worked for, 40 whatever years. And I think making space for these types of conversations is where the growth mindset lives, right? That we don't have to get rid of the kind of painful, not so shiny parts for us to be able to also explore and celebrate the good parts. We can actually hold them in tandem, respect them both deeply. And that's actually how we can recover, heal, and work through them. Because we both know shoving them under the rug isn't going to do anything except make it fester and become malignant, So it's such a critical thing when we talk about emotions to be able to hold those two together simultaneously, to be able to make space for joy, celebration, growth, excitement, and also for grief, pain, uncertainty, fear, etc.
Yeah, totally. My mind was going straight there. Even this morning, my wife misplaced a piece of jewelry that she really loves. And we still haven't found it. And we were having a conversation about this. And through her tears, in fact, she was saying that I'm grieving, the potential loss of this piece that's really valuable to me. And I know what this piece represents. And I have those people in my life right now. And I can choose to connect with those people in my life right now. And so we were having this exact conversation about how both are true. She can shed her tears and be grateful that the people are still here with her and for her. And one doesn't have to diminish the other. They're both there. That experience, I think, could be a very freeing one because the mind doesn't end up trying to choose sides, again, making everything into a team sport where if you're on that side, you can't be on this side, and so that by itself, emotions by itself, I think if people start to integrate the and more into their thinking, could be a very useful and powerful tool to start understanding the dualities. And so my question is right back at you. Where would you say you would find a pattern of dualities being present for you in the way you think or live out your life?
Oh my goodness. I think that this has been my lifelong journey, if I'm honest, right? Like, I think when I was younger, in my teens and then my early 20s, and even through my 30s, this was always such a fight because, society told me that certain things look a certain way and that I had to be that way. And I was never that way. My personality as it is usually quite contradictory. My, taste in fashion and my taste in music, and even just within what I like to explore usually always looks a little opposite. Sometimes people fall into certain molds. I usually fell outside of those molds. I have this conversation always that in my closet, I have these stilettos and my Doc Martens like side by side. And that kind of is like an image of how I usually occupy my life. And I found it, unfortunately, in most ways, at least as I was growing up and within these like key developmental years, it wasn't really understood. So it made me live very compartmentalized, like the version I was with these friends and the version I am with those friends and family and siblings and cousins. And it made me live in all of these compartments because I didn't know how to bring them all together because they were contradictory or seemingly contradictory. So really, as I've matured, as I've become more comfortable in my own skin and understood what it is to be a whole self, I was like, these aren't contradictory. These are just, all the pieces that make up me. And the more I was learning to celebrate them and understand them, the more at ease I became in my skin. And then it is true in some ways with more important things than like clothes, when it has to do with personality or how you show up in the world, people might start falling away. And that was part of this shedding process, because it's true. A lot of people like to see things in certain binary terms. It gives them safety. It gives them an understanding. And when you kind of start breaking those molds, they may or may not be ready for it. And again, I give them grace and release them, because I also am trying to go on my journey of ensuring that I stay true to myself. I stay in my integrity. And I know in my current journey, being all of me is what's important. And every time I see some old patterns coming out, it was like, well, maybe I shouldn't say I should do this or that, like some people pleasing and some masking and that chameleon behavior that I was so good at for, decades and decades of my life, because it kept me safe, because I didn't have the tools to explore the contradictory and like live in ease within it. I did go to chameleon behavior. It's like this version of me and that version of me. And now I'm, as I'm shedding and making, again, like I said, my whole self bloom, I'm more comfortable with this and conversation, both are true conversation. And so, the first answer to your question is like, this is my whole life. It's just actually my personality, whether you look at my charts, all the tests and, personality types, I usually have very contradictory things coming up, when you do all of these tests, these opposing places. But now I've realized they're my superpower, that I am constantly able to see things from different sides and different lenses, because that's actually how my brain thrives and works. So in that way, it's everywhere. In more specific examples of how that manifests in my life is, I have the example of my divorce. It was very confusing to people when I first announced my separation, then divorce, because of the certain way we were. And then on the other end, once it happened and the people in my team and my community really were like on my side and fighting my fight. And the thing I had to offer both sides and all people, but really myself, was this conversation of both are true. So what that means for me is when I look at my 28-year-old self, I offer her so much grace and love, knowing she made decisions out of love based on the knowledge and information she had. It was not her responsibility to know what 40-year-old Isla would want, need, and see. At the same time, 40-year-old Isla, I send her grace and love in choosing the separation, because she did not have to live with the choices of 28-year-old Isla. Both are true. I don't live with this guilt and shame of I should have known, I should have done this. It's just simply not true. I acted with full consciousness based on the information I had from a place of love and belief in that love. And then the 40-year-old version of me was given a permission slip to make a different choice. And so both are true. 40-year-old Isla does not have to live with the choices of 28-year-old Isla, and 28-year-old Isla didn't have to predict the future and know what 40-year-old Isla would need. Both are true. And so that's a perfect little example of how that manifests in my life, holding these two truths in tandem. And that actually is where I can offer myself grace instead of, again, shame and blame and all of this other stuff that will hold me back. Is I give myself love and compassion and say, you are making the best aligned choices of the moment. Again, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, I can't tell you what's going to happen. All I know is I can commit to every day choosing those voices, that alignment, making those choices accordingly. Same are true with the narrative I have of my ex-husband. I was deeply in love with a person and I was deeply hurt by that same person. The pain doesn't eliminate all the love, and the love doesn't mask all the pain. Both are true.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. Like everything you just spoke to on a personal level, it's a really great example. And I think a lot of people can use that and use these experiences you described for their own experiences and realize where both can be true for them. At the same time, where my mind was going as you were talking about all this is outside of oneself again. That's kind of where I tend to go. So when I look at social climate, when I look at political climates, when I look at sports, for crying out loud, I was reading the comments section and someone wrote something along the lines like, true fans don't just leave their team when they're struggling. And I was like, true fans, like what's the definition? What's a true fan? And then like to critique something, does that mean you're not a true fan? To have an opinion on something, does that mean you don't like that sport or that team or that player? And like, I was just like, there felt like there's no room again to like express and feel.
Yeah.
And so it
Okay.
kind of goes to what we were saying. So I think what I was just going to say briefly on that is when we're at opposite ends in ideology about anything, I think what I've found useful with myself and working with others is to start by accepting the opposite end just for the sake of mental exercise, and then saying, okay, what else can be true about both of us? What's the commonality here? That and or both are true, finding commonality, I think it'd be very scary for people if they really don't like the other side, if they don't really like what they hear or see or feel from that quote unquote opposing view. But I think to go back to fully embracing this topic and really evolving our level of thinking and our ability to live in harmony, we have to, at one point, ask that question. Though I may not agree with 70, 80, 90% of what's being said, is there a 10% where we're actually aligned? Family values, human values, they just want love or peace in the world, just like I want love or peace in the world. What is it that we're actually at the core of us, both in alignment with? And I find sometimes I can ease the focus on the differences and give room for this type of conversation to have their truth live in parallel with my truth, because at the bottom of this equation, we agree on a fundamental right or expression of what we're both after. Does that make sense to you at all?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. But I'm going to take it like way back. I want to start at like your first comment about this fan comment.
Mm.
And I'm going to get curious because that's what we do. And I'm going to say what happens, what I'm hearing when I see that statement, when I hear that statement, if a client was telling me this, if it's happening in my real life at the grocery store, what I hear is pain. And what that
Yeah.
pain is saying is, I don't know how to process the world outside of these rules. It feels super scary. You know, our concepts of loyalty, our concepts of love, all of these big things are how we connect to each other. We're already so deeply lonely. We're already so deeply disconnected that we're so desperate in finding commonalities within each other. That's how we've been taught to connect is we're the same, we're the same, we're the same. So our muscles are very strong in looking for the same to know that, okay, this person is safe. You know, most of all of these impulses are back to our primal behaviors, which are just how to keep myself safe. And so when someone suddenly disrupts that, like we were both fans of Team Blue, and now you want to go for Team Red, that disrupts all our safety. It's like, wait a minute, did I know you? Do I understand you? What happened to loyalty? But again, if we kind of remove all that noise, it's because I don't know how to connect anymore if we don't have these things in common. I don't feel safe anymore if we don't define these things the exact same way. And that fear takes over and doesn't leave space for our critical thinking and reimagining connection in a new narrative.
I think you said that very beautifully. And that's kind of what I was trying to allude to when I said getting to a commonality. Because if someone is no longer, let's say, this is such a silly example, by the way, but like if someone's no longer a true fan of Team Blue, it's probably for the same bottom line of emotion that I'm trying to get to, which is pain. They're disappointed by something. And then the truest fan of Team Blue is also disappointed that you're walking away from Team Blue. So the pain of it is actually the same. And that's kind of the lens in which I like to look at these problems. So I really love how you laid it out there. And I'm saying we can get so stuck on the behavior, but we need to take the time to look what's beneath that. And if it is disconnect, if it is fear, if it is pain, if it's not having the ability to express that, at least for me, I try to get to a place of empathy there. How do I then take on that understanding so I can have a both are true mentality about it?
I think it's also critical to say it doesn't mean it all works out. So I have an example for this: be able to hold nuance and also it not work out. So I had a really great friend. Our bond was very strong. It was one of those fast friendships that, you know, was very meaningful to both of us. And at the end of our kind of time together, she had a very clear point of view on how things unfolded. Her reality and my reality were in direct opposition. And so there was just a moment in time where a version of me would have needed to argue it and bring out the facts or be right or be liked even. But this new version and this new nuanced way of looking at it was like, both are true. Who am I to discuss her sense of reality? For whatever reason, it's being formed in this way. This is, again, what's going to keep her safe. This is, again, the story she needs to tell to make sense of her world. And so I might not know all the information present to her to form this narrative. And if the choice is to no longer be friends, it's also not my job to convince her otherwise. So in that setting, while her view of this story was literally in direct opposition of mine, I'm not even using the word truth because I think that's besides the point of what is true and is not in this circumstance, because no real safety or anything was, in question. It was just a differencing of opinions on a matter that she chose then to end our friendship. And I remember this conversation so clearly, the last one we had. And I remember thinking, that's okay. Like, this is completely in opposition of my beliefs. This is completely in opposition of my reality, of my truth. And it's okay. And I said, it was kind of this metaphor that the door is open. I'm never forcing anyone to stay and she will leave. And there was a sense of relief also for me to not have to fix it, to not have to change her mind or prove my point or be right or be liked even. Like, I had to become okay with not being liked and knowing that that's another way in which we hold two realities in tandem. Our friendship was so powerful and so important, and now it no longer exists. Again, one doesn't negate the other. Her version of reality and my version of reality are completely contradictory, but both are true.
And I think that's, again, a very powerful point because our brain wants resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we want to know that what we're doing is right, is correct, it's beneficial. And if we're very honest with ourselves, many times we want to know that we're right, correct.
Absolutely.
Versus the other person, especially in an ending relationship. It's like you would rather think they're wrong and you were right and let it
And
move
you want to paint them the villain.
Yeah.
So much easier.
Yeah.
But that's not, if painting them the villain is the easy way out, this is probably how most people conduct relationships. It doesn't serve us. Her being a villain or anyone being a villain doesn't actually serve me. It just makes me not have to look at the parts where I don't want to look. Instead, I just understand the complexity of the matter. And going back to your original point about emotion, both were true. I had a deep sense of relief and pride in myself in that moment, being like, damn, Isla, last year, Isla wouldn't have done this. I am so proud of this year, Isla. And also at the exact same time, I had tremendous grief. Like, this person was so important and so pivotal for so many reasons. And I'm grieving the loss of a friendship. Both are true.
It's wild because, like, what you're saying is I'm allowing for this friendship to end without distorting my image of the other human or their reality. And that's hard work. That doesn't come, as we say, it doesn't come for free. You gotta work on that.
And I tell you, when I tell you the story, that moment, I said, if this was last year, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah.
Self-destructed, or I would have thought it, like, the people pleasing and the needing to be like, I would have forced my entry back in, created so many more narratives. Like, I could see that change in that year span of this happening. Like, last year, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, I would have reacted differently. Today, with the new tools, with the amount of time I've practiced these tools, I'm looking at it and I was like, okay. It's like literally someone was like, you're, the worst. And I'm like, okay, I'm the worst.
I think,
that wasn't what she said, but it's just addressing that moment with that truth, even if it's not yours, and saying, okay.
It needs to be said that there's this like level of compassionate boundaries for yourself and for other people. And I know it's not necessarily the topic that we're discussing today, so I don't want to go too heavy into it, but the need for it to be said, because we're hitting a point now where there's conflict. We're hitting a point now where there's this tension, again, whether it's internal within you or with somebody else, with a group of people. Throughout the pandemic, there was a lot of tension with people of all sides, and everyone wanted to do the right thing. Everyone wanted to find the right way to go about it, but not everyone agreed on what that was. And so this both are true or yes and compassionate boundaries means that you can see their side, see your side, don't need to vilify someone, don't need to distort your own lens, distort your own heart lens, which I think is the worst because you start to hate on people, and don't need to be at dinner parties with that individual or those people as well if you're not able to process what's going on or feel like it's appropriate. Now, again, we can have a whole episode on this, and we probably should. There's again that little fine line between, if I'm not at your backyard shindig, doesn't mean I have to write anonymous hate mail to you as well. Like, these things don't have to live together. And I want to make that point so very clear. Character assassination or judgmental commentary doesn't have to be the way that we go about two truths. I think your story really highlights that. And I love that about your story, that there can be this like understanding that they have a point of view, you have a point of view. You don't need to break them down, nor break yourself down, but just recognize that two humans see things differently, and no longer is there room at this time in the timeline, at this point in the timeline, for the two of you to come to a resolution that seems healthy and fit.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, this concept of gaslighting occurs, is when, it's not the issue of having opposing opinions that's the problem. It's that in defense of your opinion, you need to break down the other person. That's when the gaslighting occurs. So even in that scenario, if I'm
going to interrupt, Isla. You do this to me, so I'm going to do it to you. Say that one more time with a megaphone for the people in the back to hear it. One more time.
So this is, again, how this concept of gaslighting occurs. It's not the issue of having opposing opinions. That is never the problem. We are allowed to have many opinions. We're allowed to change our opinions today, tomorrow, however we want. That is not the pain. The pain is where we decide that to defend our opinion, we're going to diminish the other person's worth, value, sanity, all of these ways in which we look at that person as less than. That's when we start to gaslight. Like, even in this example I gave of my friend, again, our truths were completely opposing. But I literally heard those arguments in my mouth coming out, and I stopped them because I thought, in our friendship, we worked so hard at strengthening her intuition. She's now telling me her intuition is telling her this. Again, it's in complete opposition of my reality. But I said, I don't want to be messing with those newly forming muscles. It would have been a form of gaslighting, me saying, this is insane. This is not what happened. But, all of that would have been a way that, for whatever reason, was interfering with her process at that moment. Again, who knows what happens 10 years from now, and maybe we'll never come to a resolution, and maybe we'll never speak to this person again, and that's okay. But I think the critical element, again, is that even when we are looking at things completely at opposite views, we do not agree, it does not give us the right to attack that person's self-worth. It does not give us the right to question their mental health or anything that diminishes that human life and the dignity they deserve. We disagree. We're allowed to disagree. Like I said, that is not the issue. And we can change our thoughts and opinions at any time. What we're not allowed to do is attack that person's humanity to get across our point of view.
I agree. That's an easy one to agree with.
Not for all of us. For us.
For me, yeah. For me specifically, that's the easy one to agree with. The final thought I have around this is a concept that I came up with many moons ago when I was trying to work on how I deal with opposing thoughts. I like to allow someone's point of view or ideas to marinate within my mind for a little bit. I think that takes a skill and it takes experience to figure out how much it should marinate, like how long I should allow those thoughts or feelings to be within me. But I found it really useful when I started this experiment because it took me away from my knee-jerk reactions and my knee-jerk responses to what was said about me, about the world, about whatever. And I think if you're struggling with the and concept, if you're struggling with both are true, try the marinating tool where when someone says something, you just let it sit with you. you just like let it just sit, and you can journal about it. You can talk to another friend about it. You can obviously think of it on your own. But the goal, if you're talking to someone else about it, is not, again, to poke holes. It's actually to get curious and say, what other truth have I maybe not seen or understood? And again, it's not even to take on their truth, but it's to work the mind in a way where you can see multiple truths, you can see multiple ideas, and you can see where the gap is in your own thinking, and maybe the gap is in your own perspective. And that's the one tool I would suggest for anyone who's maybe struggling to understand where they can take this concept.
Absolutely. So coming off of that, let's add some more tools for you to think about. Let's start with yourself. Get a little curious with yourself and your life on things that might seem, contradictory, but actually, really work in tandem together. Look through your closet. Is there 2 types of, or 3 or 4 types of fashion senses that seem contradictory that, you love and that really embody your whole self? Think of the kind of music you listen to. Explore all the ways nuance works, in the shadows of your life, to start getting more comfortable with this concept. The things that usually or may seem contradictory are not necessarily, and can work beautifully in tandem. Then take it a little deeper and explore your emotions. Think of a certain event or time or place that something has happened and you had 2 opposite emotions occurring at the same time that were true, like relief and grief, love and dislike. All of these concepts with people, places, and things that happened. And how did you deal with it? And how can you reevaluate those same occurrences now with this in mind without having to shame one of those parts, which allowing them to bloom in tandem and really take space at the same time. I brought to the table today on our podcast the power of nuance, this idea that both are true, because we ultimately believe this is how you optimize your growth. This is how you optimize your thinking and allow yourself to offer yourself compassion and grace in all the parts of your journey that aren't so easy, all the parts that are, a little harder to get through. I believe if you inject this in there, you have more space to breathe and be and explore. Then when you're ready, take it to your outside relationships, people in your life, past relationships that, didn't go as planned, and see if looking at it through this lens offers that same space and grace and compassion for them. And again, yourself. When we leave this podcast, I would love for you to think about what is an example of a time, place, or something in your life that happened that you had to hold 2 seemingly opposite, contradictory truths, maybe in tandem. And how did you deal with it? We would love to hear about it. Thank you for listening, friends. What shifted for you during this episode? We'd love to hear your insights. Write us with any questions, commentary, or episode ideas at theshift@mindshiftleadership.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would deeply appreciate a like and subscribe.
The Shift is brought to you by MindShift Leadership, a heart-centered, evidence-based, mindset-powered leadership company, empowering you with the training to prioritize mental health, inclusion, and performance optimization.